live? No, not yet. Hey everybody, sorry, just looking at a video of two dogs. Fitting, I guess. Hey, so this is Live with Kevin. I'm Kevin, and today we're talking about positive reinforcement. That terminology is thrown around a lot. Pretty much, it's kind of a buzzword now. Buzzwords, if you will, positive reinforcement. So I want to talk about what it is. I want to talk about how we can use it to our advantage, how it is used daily without us even doing anything. Um, but first things first, I want to talk about the fact that positive reinforcement is one of the ways that dogs learn. So there's basically two types of ways that dogs learn. One is by way of consequence. One is by way of association. So the association part is not something I'm going to talk about today, but it's basically, hey, if this happens, what happens next? And so a dog will build an association with that. Um, so, with the other version, with like positive reinforcement per se, it's more or less it's driven by behavior. So when a behavior happens, what is the consequence? So positive reinforcement is more or less when a behavior happens and something happens after the consequence happens. If the dog enjoys it and the consequence is something that the dog receives and it's something added, and I'm trying not to get all technical here, but basically, let's say dog sits, dog gets a treat. Now, if the dog is sitting more frequently or more likely to sit in those scenarios, it's safe to say that positive reinforcement was used. Um, Now, if we look at the big picture, positive reinforcement isn't just something that you can just say, I did it and it didn't work, or something to that effect. It's something that, by definition, if it's done correctly, it is working because only if the behavior is happening more frequently is it actually working. So if I, for example, my dog's out in the yard and I say, "Come here, Rosa, come here, B," and my dog comes over to me and they're like, "Hey, I'm here," and I'm like, "Good doggy," and I pet him all over the neck and the head, and my intent is to reward my dogs for coming to me. So that's my intent. But then I say, okay, go play. And then I call my dogs again a minute later and they don't come. It's very likely that what I just did, even though it was an attempt to be positive reinforcement, was not positive reinforcement because the behavior didn't happen again. And I mean, across the board, I mean, it's basically if the behavior starts happening more frequently, it's and if something, again, it's all kind of trying not to be too technical, but if something is added and the dog enjoys it and the behavior happens more frequently, it's probably going to fall under positive reinforcement. So we use it all the time when training dogs. I mean, heck, training people, you end up using positive reinforcement. So it's not like species specific, it's across the board. If you're an animal, you're going to learn by positive reinforcement. So, that being said, again, it's not something that we can necessarily attempt to do and say it didn't work. It's either it didn't work because we didn't do it correctly, um, and that's pretty much it. And there's a lot of ways that a lot of things that can happen. So maybe I'm trying to reinforce my dog for sitting. I like the term reinforce because it's kind of more technical, but it means if I did it correctly, the behavior is reinforced, it's going to happen more. But you could say reward. If I'm trying to reward my dog for sitting, and maybe there's a ton of things going on, and maybe my dog is clearly motivated by the dog that's over there, and all he really wants is to meet that dog. Maybe I say sit, and he sits, and I offer him a treat, and then he eats it, but then he goes back to staring at that dog, and I'm like, hey, sit, and then he doesn't sit again. It's very likely that even though he ate the treat, it didn't reinforce the behavior, so therefore he's not going to, it wasn't positive reinforcement. If we use that same scenario though, if I asked him to sit and he sat, and then I let him go over and greet the dog, I could quickly teach him that sitting is the fastest way to greet dogs. That would most likely reinforce the sitting behavior, and you're going to get faster sits and sits happening more frequently in that context, at least. So, if we're using it to our advantage, if we're trying to get our dogs to do behaviors that we want them to do, and then we provide something that they enjoy as a consequence to their behavior, if we're doing it correctly, it's going to lead to them doing the behaviors more. But at the same point, if we allow our dogs to do behaviors that we don't like and they get something that they like, it's probably going to be positively reinforced and they're going to do the behavior more. So a lot of problem behaviors are actually, driven by positive reinforcement. So jumping on the counter, my dog jumps on the counter, gets a ham, I don't know, whatever, gets something really tasty. Um, it's very likely that your dog's going to jump on the counter again because the last time it resulted in something awesome. Leash pulling. Most leash pulling is to try to get to something. Hey, there's a dog or a person or something over there. And if I allow my dog to pull to get to it, very likely it's going to reinforce the pulling behavior. He's enjoying what he received for the pulling. Something was given to him, even though it's not given to him technically by us. He's still getting something from the environment. So that's positive reinforcement. Likely that he's going to pull again. So across the board, positive reinforcement is about behavior happens, something awesome happens after the behavior happens, and if it's all working correctly, the behavior is going to happen more frequently. And if you think, positive reinforcement can work fantastically, it's awesome when done correctly. So think about that and think about, okay, if I'm trying to get my dog to do something, I'm giving him rewards, but he's not doing the behavior anymore frequently or any more often. What you're attempting to do is you're attempting to use positive reinforcement, but you may not be. So if you're trying to use food, for example, maybe your food isn't good enough in that moment, in that environment. So for example, like in my house, I've got Kix cereal, something cheap that my dogs will work for in the house. But to say, hey, doggies, I got Kix cereal and we're outside. Here's a perfect example. I might be able to say, hey, sit. And my dog's like, yeah, I'll sit. And I give him my Kix cereal inside the house. And he's like, well, I wasn't doing anything else. That's pretty cool. I like that. But say we're outside, ask him to sit, and he sits, and I give him my Kix cereal. He might go, huh, okay, well, that wasn't very tasty. Let me just move on with my life. And so I ask him to sit again. He may not sit, just to use it as an example. So with being in different environments, when there's a lot of distractions, it's likely that you're going to have to up the ante. You're going to have to do something a little bit more appealing. And by doing so, it's likely that you'll be able to reinforce the behaviors that you want to happen outside as well. And one of the most potent things that you can do is, if it works out, you can use the distractions as the reward. So again, say your dog sees his dog friend 20 feet away and he's like, I really want to greet my dog friend. Well, we can successfully teach your dog, for example, how to walk all the way to his dog friend doing the behavior that we want, which would be like a loose leash walk. And then the reward is getting to see his dog friend. So then we would basically be saying, hey, if you do this behavior, loose leash walking, you're going to get what you want, which is to greet your dog friend. If we are consistent about that, it's very likely that we're going to see more loose leash walking in the future, because that's the behavior that leads to the consequence that your dog likes. So think of it all that way. Depending on what we're dealing with too, you might not need, you may, for example, if we're dealing with some like behavioral issues, like my dog is afraid of things, or let's just use fear, for example. I don't typically use positive reinforcement for fear type behaviors. I use a process that involves conditioning and changing associations. So if you're dealing with your dog doesn't enjoy strangers coming in your home, and you're trying to say, hey, sit, and you're trying to give your dog a treat, there's a very good chance that's not going to work, because your dog is caught up in his emotions of how unhappy he is about a stranger being there. So that would be a time where you'd say, well, I tried positive reinforcement. It didn't work. What else is there? And so that's an example of, that's probably not the answer. Maybe for some dogs that have like a very, very low level fear with strangers coming over, you might be able to do something like that. But in the grand scheme of things, for like changing an association, you're not going to, it's not common to use positive reinforcement for that. You could, and I'll explain why. But most often you're just going to go with like a straight conditioning approach to change associations. Now, the reason that positive reinforcement is cool is because when you're using something that your dog enjoys, your dog is automatically going to build a positive association with what's going on. So let's just say you're in a group class and there's 3 other dogs, 3 other people, and then yourself and your dog, and you're working on sits and downs and stays, and your dog is receiving food as part of that, as a reward to reinforce the behavior is the goal. If your dog's enjoying that, he's also going to be saying, hey, when I'm here, I do these behaviors, I get a lot of good stuff. And he's also most likely going to be building an association with the other dogs and people in the room as well. So the cool thing, and he's going to build an association with you too. Working with you, responding to your cues, leads to him doing behaviors, which leads to him getting a snack. In the grand scheme of things, he's going to say, I like doing this. I like you. You predict good stuff. And so with positive reinforcement, you can't have the side effect of building an association, which is really cool. And across the board, I mean, anytime you're working with consequences, whether you are, giving something to your dog that he enjoys for doing something you like, whether you are when you're adding something that your dog dislikes, there's going to be an association involved. So it's really important, like if you're using punishment, for example, if you're using something that hurts or scares your dog, it may, if you're doing it correctly, you're going to decrease the unwanted behavior, but you are most likely going to help your dog build a negative association with whatever's happening. So, like now, for example, I would teach my dog V that walking with me on a loose leash gets him, he can sniff trees and get some tasty food rewards on occasion. Um, and when he sees a dog, dogs predict him looking back at me and he gets a snack for that. Whereas back in the day, I was trying to use more of a punishment based method where if he saw a dog and barked, he received a collar correction. Well, and I'm getting off subject with the whole positive reinforcement thing, but I'm bring it back here. But the whole idea is, when you're using those types of consequences, it's likely that your dog's going to be building an association, positive or negative, depending on what's going on. So you got to be careful. So, I mean, across the board, using positive reinforcement is great because it's going to, if done correctly, lead to more behavior that you want. If you're doing it correctly too, it's going to lead to less behavior of what you don't want because you're probably teaching your dog how to do what you do want when you want it. So he can't do what you don't want when you don't want it. So all that being said, it's a good thing to put in place of unwanted behaviors. And I had another point, but I forgot what it was. So the overall idea though is, get the behavior to happen and then give something that your dog enjoys as a consequence to that behavior. If you're seeing the behavior happen again and again and again, it's safe to say that you have positively reinforced the behavior. If you're trying to do that and it's not working and you're not seeing a change in the behavior, then it's not working correctly. And dogs, dogs do what works, and dogs do more. Breaking that down is what works is what provides a consequence that they enjoy. So if you're continuously doing that, hey, lying down on this rug predicts getting small food rewards when we're in the kitchen. If you do it over and over and over and over again, like clockwork, your dog is going to develop a bias towards wanting to be there, and he's going to say, oh, this is a great place. I like being here. This behavior works very well. I'm going to do it more and more and more. And you're just going to see your dog kind of dive more into those things. So it's pretty cool how it all works out. But again, if you've tried it and it doesn't work, it's because you're not doing it correctly. And that's not your fault. It's just, you're attempting to do it and you're just not doing it correctly. So one of the things I also like to say about this, and I'm not the one that made this up, I forget who said it first, but we can't really choose. It's not up to us what our dogs find reinforcing. I mean, we have pretty good ideas. Like I could guess that if I asked my dog Rosa to come to me and I gave her a piece of cheese, if she walked away and I called her back, it's very likely that she's going to come back again. She's going to find that rewarding or reinforcing. But at the same point, if I were to call her over and offer her a butt scratching, and she likes that, but maybe that's not very motivating to her at the moment. So if I called her back, she'd go, it's not really, you didn't really do anything for me last time. It didn't really reward the behavior. So point being, it's not necessarily up to us what rewards the behavior, what a dog finds rewarding. It's really up to them. Kind of like for us, for one, like I like doing things like rock climbing. I find that rewarding. I might look at that as, hey, after I finish my work, I'm going to go give myself that as a reward, whereas other people would not find rock climbing rewarding. So in different situations too, maybe I'm very sore from running all day, running around, and I'm tired. Maybe I wouldn't find the rock gym rewarding at the moment. So it's just, we're all living, breathing beings. Sometimes we're going to find things rewarding in certain moments. Other times we're not. So just kind of make sure that you are ready to reward with different types of things and look at the big picture. Try to figure out what you want to accomplish and say, okay, this is what I want. Here's some things that I can provide for my dog for doing the things that I want. And let's see what works best. So positive reinforcement is all about, getting behavior to happen, giving them something that they enjoy in hopes that it happens more and more and more. And again, usually it's a safe bet. When you're inside your house and you're using food or something, chances are very good that it's going to reward the behavior and you're using positive reinforcement. It gets a little dicier when you're outside and there's a lot going on because there's a lot of motivation out there. But if you have any questions, let me know. But just, it's very effective when done correctly. It's not effective at all when done incorrectly. So at All Dogs Go to Kevin, we use food, we use environmental rewards like sniffing things, greeting people, greeting other dogs if that's a possibility. Anything that motivates your dog, you generally can use if you get them to do the behavior that they want first. So that most likely is going to fall into the positive reinforcement category. So if you have questions, reach out. Thanks for listening. Take care. Have a good day. See y'all next week.